Boston Bruins didn't just lose last night in Ottawa to end their 7-game winning streak. They really gave that one away.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Today is Friday, November 14th. Thank you so much for making Locked On Boston Bruins your first listen every day. And on today's episode, we're looking back at last night's winning streak busting loss to the Ottawa Senators. We're going to start with why Boston's mistakes, not Ottawa's execution, ended the winning streak. We'll discuss David Pastrnak, Morgan Geekie, Mark Kastelik dragging this team back into the game. And we'll also preview Saturday night's huge matchup with the Montreal Canadiens and the stakes after last night's loss. After every game, we always look at the relevant storylines, stats, and signals. And that's what we do here on Locked On Boston Bruins, your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, before we get started, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on socials at Locked NHL Bruins. That's on X, Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads, TikTok. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan, and I've been covering this team and the NHL for various outlets for nearly 20 years now. The Bruins came into Ottawa last night riding a 7-game winning streak, including a win just a few days ago against those very Senators. And you know that Radiohead song where they say, you do it to yourself, and that's why it really hurts? Well, last night's loss was fairly self-inflicted. The Bruins kind of beat themselves. Now, all credit to Tim Stützle, Claude Giroux, Drake Batherson, other Senators who helped get the job done. But the Bruins were on their back foot early on in this one. Opening penalty in the first minute of the game, which was an erroneous call because it was actually a Senator who caused his own player to trip. And then the Senators came and scored on that opportunity, 1-0 at 1:28 of the first period. Then later on, the Bruins allowed a dreaded last-minute goal on a defensive breakdown. You're trailing 2-0 by the end of the first period. It's very hard, especially on the road, to come all the way back in those kind of situations. But hey, to their credit, they did. It was 3-1 at one point for the Ottawa Senators, and it looked as though the Bruins were going to make a bit of a comeback. First of all, Morgan Geekie scored his 12th goal of the season to make it 2-1 in the second. We'll discuss his. This isn't even a hot streak anymore. This is a real breakout. But early in the first minute of the third period, so that's a goal at 19:03 of the first, 1:06 of the third, 1:28 of the first, early, late goals, killing this team. But David Pastrnak brought them within 3-2 with a power play goal, his 402nd of his career. Significant. We'll discuss that later. Then Mark Kastelik ties it up less than 2 minutes later. But a serious defensive miscue changed the tone of this game. First of all, there was a bad line change that led to Shane Pinto's goal that made it 3-1. And then even when it was 3-2, I was watching the TSN broadcast on this one, and you could see Hampus Lindholm behind the net. He was, doing one of those typical hang on to the puck behind the net, wait for guys to get set up so that you can make that breakout pass. The crowd really started booing him because he was taking his sweet time with the puck, and he forced a breakout right into traffic. There was a turnover. Like, he had all the time in the world to make that smart breakout pass. Mike Johnson on the TSN broadcast suggested that the booing got to Lindholm and he forced it because the crowd was pressuring him. I don't know if that's real because of, Lindholm's a professional. He's dealt with those situations before, a hostile road crowd. But nevertheless, he did make that ill-advised pass into traffic. There was no clear exit plan there. And this came as he was behind the net with a full view of the ice in front of him. So he passes it out. There's a turnover. Tim Stützle makes it 4-3, and Lindholm admitted the goals, especially that one, were a lot on ourselves, meaning the Boston Bruins. There was a disallowed goal that temporarily derailed Boston's momentum, but David Pastrnak essentially scored twice on the same power play. But Boston's earlier mistakes and the later mistakes really sunk them in this one. And the win streak kind of masked some habits that they need to really tighten up here. Poor puck management, untimely penalties, messy defensive details, and both losses in their past 10 games have kind of come at the hands of the Ottawa Senators and for similar reasons. One of the problems for the Bruins last season was not only the fact that their penalty kill was pretty terrible, but also because they were extremely penalized. The Bruins right now are the most penalized team in the NHL with 91, which is 7 more than the Calgary Flames. Total minutes, they rank in a tie for second behind the Flames and the Philadelphia Flyers. Even if your penalty kill is improved, you can't continue to over exude your penalty killing team and put so much pressure on the defense. They have to tighten up that penalty management. Yes, the call in the first period was pretty bad because a replay clearly showed that it was a Senator player who was responsible for that trip. But at the same time, they're still taking too many penalties night in and night out. Mason Lohrei had a really rough shift that led to a penalty later on in the first period, failed to clear the zone twice, then took a cross-checking penalty. Tanner Jeannot had the 5-minute major for fighting Curtis McDermott in quite a spirited tilt that really got his team inspired, and the Bruins did score 2 goals after that. But that Jeffrey Viel phantom penalty really set the Bruins back, and you just can't put yourself in a position to be called like that early on in the first period, especially in the offensive zone. They did push, they did battle, they did erase a 2-goal deficit, but when your errors directly hand opponent like 3 goals, effort isn't enough, and you have to have that consistency, that intelligence throughout the game to maintain the 7-game winning streak that they were on. Now, we will take a look at some of the stats and the significance of this game. Coming up, we'll also preview Saturday night's massive game against the Canadiens in Montreal. That's all coming up here on Locked On Boston Bruins. Let's be honest, most of us can't even name all our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth. Between 401ks, savings, and investments, it's easy to lose track, and that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why more and more people are starting to use Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. It can help you organize your accounts, track your spending, and get a better handle on your investments without having to touch a spreadsheet. Don't let financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Thank you again for making Locked On Boston Bruins your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. We're continuing our look at last night's loss to the Ottawa Senators, a game that ended Boston's 7-game win streak. And throughout this streak, I've been warning of the expected goals differential and how that was possibly impacting the outlook for Boston's season. Last night, though, this wasn't really a factor, as the Bruins had the lion's share of the high danger attempts and therefore had the advantage in terms of expected goals. 5-on-5 last night, the Bruins had 7 high danger chances for compared to 4 allowed. So that's a 63.64% advantage. The expected goals at 5-on-5, 1.37 for the Bruins, 0.98 for Ottawa. That's a 59% advantage. In all situations, the expected goals tilted, though, in Ottawa's favor. They had a 56.22% advantage in all situations. They had more shots, and the attempts were pretty even, but the high danger opportunities just came easier to the Senators, I should say, because of those miscues by the Bruins. Overall, it was fairly even in terms of shots, 22-21. The Senators dominated in the faceoff circle. Both teams went 1 for 2 on the power play. And it was those defensive miscues that really skewed things, because at 5-on-5, the Bruins really dominated this game and likely should have won. The shot attempts came in Ottawa's favor, 45-37. This is at 5-on-5. The shots were 17-14 in favor of the Senators. But again, the Bruins had the high danger chance advantage as well as the scoring chance advantage. So an unfortunate result for the Bruins. They had really chipped away at that lead. They were able to tie it. Momentum really appeared to be on their side. And then you had that misplay by Hampus Lindholm behind the net, which we don't really see that often. And lo and behold, the puck ends up in the back of the net. Senators add the empty netter, and it's a 5-3 advantage. Winning streak is over. I mentioned David Pastrnak scored his 11th goal of the season. That is his 402nd goal of his career, which puts him tied with Rick Middleton in terms of Bruins all-time goal scoring. Next up on the list is catching Patrice Bergeron, which he should do here later on this season, because right now he's got 11 goals, 13 assists for 24 points, which puts him tied for 8th. And he's on pace for 47 goals, 56 assists for 104 points, which would be his, 4th consecutive 100-plus point season. The 47 goals would equal what he had 2 seasons ago. The big story is Morgan Geekie. He's now up to 12 goals, which is tied for 2nd in the NHL. And he's on pace for 52 goals. And there was so much talk last season about Morgan Geekie scoring those 33 goals and how it came after he was healthy scratched for a good chunk early on in the season. And then once he was put on the top line, he really came alive. And if you look at the goal scoring totals since January 1st of 2025 up until last night, you see how good Morgan Geekie has been. He is tied for second in the NHL in goals scored since January 1st with 37, and that is on par with Leon Draisaitl of the Edmonton Oilers, last year's Richard Trophy winner, and 4 goals behind teammate David Pastrnak. Now, Pasta and Geekie have played 62 games this calendar year, while Draisaitl played only 53 regular season games, so he's scoring at a better rate. But still, you can't lose sight of the fact that Morgan Geekie, even if you match him up against David Pastrnak, only 4 goals back in the same amount of games played. That's more than Nathan McKinnon, Alex Ovechkin, Austin Matthews, like the league's premier goal scorers. Yes, his shooting percentage is 29.6, which seems unsustainable, but somehow he's able to do it. Draisaitl is at 21.1%, Pastrnak at 17.8%. Geekie has those 37 goals on only 125 shots. So again, it's quite likely that at some point he'll fall back down to earth, but it's not happening. And Pasta, Geekie are carrying this team. Geekie's on a 50-point pace. His 12th of the season cut the deficit to 2-1. Perfect feed from Pastrnak, and he echoed Lindholm earlier by saying they shot themselves in the foot last night. But for Geekie, this isn't a hot streak. This is a true breakout, and he could be a 50-goal scorer this season. Even if he falls back down to earth, he should be able to, at this rate, shatter the 33-goal career high that he set last season. Pastrnak, again, ties Rick Middleton with goal 402. The first crack at it was disallowed on an offside. He scored 64 seconds later, continues to climb the all-time Bruins list, and when the Bruins need a moment, Pastrnak delivers it. But they're depending maybe too much on those 2 players to cover up systemic issues. When they each score, but you still lose because of turnovers, it's not a star problem. It's a depth and execution problem. Speaking of depth, though, Tanner Jeannot, Mark Kastelik displayed some signs of life. Jeannot drive to the net. Kastelik ties it. These are the types of complementary efforts Boston needs more consistently. Don't forget, though, they're playing without 2 guys who are expected to be in the top 6 in Elias Lindholm and Casey Middlestat. To have achieved that 7-game win streak with Marat Husnudinov skating on the top line, and he did not look out of place last night. He got the secondary assist on Morgan Geekie's goal. You've got Alex Steeves, who is riding where Casey Middlestat usually skates. It's pretty impressive to have maintained that winning streak despite those pretty key injuries. Nevertheless, it came to an end last night, and big picture, they had an opportunity to jump ahead of Montreal in the Atlantic Division standings last night. If they had won or even got a point, Montreal, who lost 7-0 last night to the Dallas Stars, still at 22 points. The Bruins now tied with Montreal and Ottawa for first in the Atlantic with 22 points. If you kick it to point percentage, though, the Bruins are currently in 4th because Ottawa won last night, as did Detroit. And they are 2 points back with 2 games in hand. The Bruins at 579, still ahead of Tampa, still ahead of Florida, Toronto, and the lowly Buffalo Sabres, who have dropped 4 in a row and seem firmly entrenched in the basement. The Bruins, though, this is crazy. There's only 2 teams in the Atlantic with positive goal differentials. It's Boston and Tampa, and they're just at +1. Ottawa's at 0, and then even Montreal, who's in first after that 7-0 loss, they're at a -1. So the Metropolitan Division, on the other hand, they have no teams below 0 when it comes to goal differential. Columbus is last at 0. Carolina at +14. So perhaps the balance is shifting towards the Metro here. Right now, 2 wildcard teams are from the Atlantic Division. Actually, one of them is the Islanders and then the Red Wings, with the Rangers right there, the Flyers, Blue Jackets, and the Panthers all within 1 point. Washington, who won the Metro last year, they're down in in 15th with only 17 points. So it's a bit of turbulence in the Eastern Conference so far. The Bruins fell down a bit after that loss last night. They'll have a chance to rebound Saturday night, Hockey Night in Canada, in Montreal. Always a chaotic scene, and we'll preview that one here as the podcast continues. When you're hydrated, everything just works better. Focus, energy, mood, even your skin. And that's why my wife, for example, has been using Drip Drop. She is an avid runner, and she has come to rely on this doctor-developed hydration system that keeps her running at full power no matter what her day looks like. It's not your average sports drink. It delivers 3 times the electrolytes, half the sugar of leading brands, using a science-backed formula trusted by medical professionals, firefighters, and over 90% of top college and pro athletes. She likes using Drip Drop as part of her daily routine. She'll mix a packet in the morning before running or during that midday slump. Hydration is a non-negotiable. Drip Drop helps her feel sharper, calmer, and honestly, just better overall. Right now, Drip Drop is offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONNHL for 20% off. Stock up now and keep your body and mind performing at their best with Drip Drop. We are loving hockey season, and nothing beats being in the arena for those opening games. Let's be real. Getting tickets can be a total headache. Between waiting in queues, surprise fees, prices that jump right before checkout, it's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. That's where Game Time comes in. The app that gives fans the advantage. It's your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NHL tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. Let's say you want to go to Montreal, catch the Bruins and Canadiens tomorrow night. Check out Game Time. There's no surprise fees at checkout. What you see is what you pay, and you see exactly what your view will look like in the Bell Center with their in-app seat view feature. You can find NHL tickets for as low as $25. Take the guesswork out of buying those tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Saturday night, Hockey Night in Canada, live from the Bell Center in Montreal. A rivalry for the ages. The Bruins and Canadiens will meet, and both teams are coming off pretty disappointing losses. The Bruins, of course, losing 5-3 last night to the Senators. The Canadiens, though, losing 7-0 to the Dallas Stars. They've been outscored 12-1 over their past 2 games. Losses to the Kings and to Dallas. They are 1, 2, and 2 over their past 5 games. Losing to Philly in a shootout, New Jersey in overtime, beating Utah, and then those 2 losses back to back. So the Bruins are either finding Montreal at a vulnerable moment or at a time where they are pretty upset and looking to tune a rival on home ice. It's the first of 4 meetings between these 2 teams this season. The next one will be right before Christmas on December 23rd. Tied in points right now, and it's a big, big game on a huge stage. It'll likely be Jeremy Swayman in net for the Bruins. Korpisalo got the loss last night. Swayman 7-4 with a .900 save percentage. Sam Montembeault might get the start, as it was Jacob Dobas who was tuned last night. Montembeault 4-4-1 with an .857 save percentage. The Canadiens are led in scoring by Nick Suzuki, who's got 20 points in 17 games. Cole Caulfield, Ivan Demidov, Juraj Slafkovsky, Kirby Dach, all guys to watch, as well as Lane Hudson, Nate Dobson on the back end. This is a very good team, currently struggling, but make no mistake, they can beat you on any given night. There's a reason why they're first in the Atlantic to this point this season. David Pastrnak, 7 points in his past 5 games, 4 goals, 3 assists. Geekie with 4 assists over his last 5 games to lead the team in that stat. He's finding his playmaking again after looking like a Cy Young Award winner early on the season with like 10 goals, 1 assist. He's now up to 12 goals, 6 assists, 18 points to sit second on the team in scoring behind Pastrnak. Numbers wise, let's look at the special teams. Pretty even when it comes to special teams. They're pretty even across the board. If you look at power play success, the Bruins are currently sixth in the NHL at 25.8. That's been a huge reason why they've been surging this season. Last year, they were bottom in power play penalty kill. If your power play is succeeding, it can cover up some warts like the expected goals differential or being outshot. They're 6th in the NHL. Full credit to Steve Spott for revitalizing the power play. The Canadiens, though, aren't far back. They're 8th in the NHL on the power play, 24.5% success rate. Penalty kill, these teams very even as well. The Bruins rank 15th. The Canadiens are 17th. Face-offs is where we see a bit of disparity. The Bruins, 52.6% success rate, good for 8th, even after they were pretty much demolished in the dots last night by the Senators. Canadiens rank 13th. So fairly even so far. And it continues when you look at the goals for and against. The Bruins, 3.37 goals for and against so far this season. That ranks them 7th in goals for, 24th in goals against. The Canadiens, they're 6th in goals for at 3.41, and they have an identical 3.41 goals allowed at 25th. So these teams fairly even so far this season, which should make for a very good matchup tomorrow at the Bell Center in Montreal. I'm very, very excited for this one. We'll see how Boston responds after a self-inflicted loss. Teams often struggle on the second leg of a short road swing unless they get angry. Does Boston clean up the details, or do those mistakes linger? Montreal's young core has speed, the exact thing that punished Boston versus Ottawa. Suzuki, Caulfield, Slafkovsky. The Bruins' gaps are loose again. If they're irresponsible with the puck, they will get burned. Swayman probably be in the bounce back spot. Special teams could be the swing factor. Both pretty equal all across the board. Bruins have to control their emotions early, something they kind of failed to do in Ottawa. It's a rivalry game, Saturday night, Bell Center. It's going to be chaos. Must watch TV. I'll be sure to post TikTok short reel after the game with immediate reaction. We'll be back on Monday to break down Bruins Habs. Thank you so much for making Locked On Boston Bruins your first listen every day. For your second listen, please check out the Locked On NHL Game Night podcast. Every game, every night until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on the Locked On NHL YouTube channel or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you so much to the everydayers out there who already subscribe to Locked On Boston Bruins on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Please join them today and tell a friend about the podcast. Please take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we'll talk to you again here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network.